match today.
Yep, could be, as we said, Team Norway versus Team Singapore. And starting up, we have Bendik Gudevold representing Norway. Just love their, the Norwegian icon, the Ninetales, which happens to be an incredible Pokemon. In this format, we're actually seeing an alternative weather setter in Tyranitar on the team. And yeah, just looking at Bendik's accomplishments, a Malmo top 32 in 2023, definitely a great accomplishment there. And then has been competing in the World Cup for Norway for the past 4 years. So not new to this, going to be trying his best to take that experience to a win over Singapore.
A very interesting team here as well. This is a man who really does not like Incineroar. We see there's a Golden Go here, and then the rest of the team is Tyranitar, who's got a pretty good matchup into Incineroar, and then Garchomp holding the Clear Amulet, Sneasler with the White Herb, Kilowattrel with the competitive ability. Bendik really scaring off any potential Intimidates from the opponents. Interestingly, though, we see Sneasler and Kilowattrel, two Pokemon that often like to run a Focus Sash as their item, but with the sand being set up by Tyranitar, they can't hold that item because it'll get chipped away immediately by their own Tyranitar's Sandstream ability. So instead we're seeing a more offensive item on Kilowattrel and Sneasler going for the Unburdened White Herb set.
Yeah, the Unburdened pairs both well with the Close Combat and the Common Intimidate, like you mentioned. If you go for Close Combat, you lower your defenses, and then those are cleared away by the White Herb, and then you're able to be double speed effectively. Whether you have Tailwind or not, that's an alternative form of late-game speed control for your Sneasler specifically. Like you said, Clear Amulet, so strong into the Incineroar. You also have Terra Ground on the Garchomp, threaten a likely one-hit KO if they're not physically defensive with the Stomping Tantrum or Earthquake after going for Terra Ground. Also pairs fantastically with the Terra Flying Tyranitar, going for that Earthquake, Terra Flying, Terra Blast combo. And yeah, you mentioned earlier that this team, although it's primarily physically offensive with 4 physical attackers, just really sneezes at Incineroar basically. Competitive Kilowattrel really dispels that. The White Herb blows that away, the Clear Amulet as well. But even the Goldengo, which is traditionally beat pretty hard by Incineroar, has the Terra Dragon, which is even, the Flare Blitz just doing completely negligible damage after you go for that Terrifier. They have to go for the knockoff, which can be annoying for sure, but at least they're not able to take a 1-hit knockout with the Flare Blitz.
Let's talk about Incineroar. Let's have a look if Harrold, Bendik's opponent, is even bringing it with him this week. So let's have a quick look at Harrold's team here. And we are going to see, spoiler alert here, there is an Incineroar in this team. So all of that anti-Incineroar tech looking pretty nice for Bendik. But again, some very interesting sets on Harrold's team.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it's not that common, we promise, but no Focus Sash on the Sneasler. We have a White Herb once again. This time, instead of opting for Fake Out, we have a Terra Dark Throat Chop set. And then I think a lot of similar or very standard pieces in the Dragonite, Ninetales, Ursaluna Blood Moon running that Assault Vest set, and the Incineroar with Clear Amulet, which is a little substandard. But the Goldango running a Terra Fighting Terra Blast, which we did see the Tyranitar and the Incineroar on Bendik's team, so that's going to come in really handy in a pinch, just completely shifting a matchup where normally you would be weak to Incineroar and Tyranitar to threatening a potential 1-hit KO depending on how those Pokemon are trained with the Terra Fighting Terra Blast.
And there's a good chance I think that does come up in this matchup here, because looking at the team that Harrold's bringing, Tyranitar's a very tough matchup. Obviously, Incineroar can intimidate it, but there's a lot of things to scare away the Incineroar, plus Tyranitar's hit gives super effective damage. Dragonite loses its multi-scale to the Sand Chip, and is also threatened for super effective damage. Ursaluna, strangely, Ursaluna feels like it really should be winning the Tyranitar matchup, but with the Assault Vest, Earth Power doesn't do half to Tyranitar, and Tyranitar can 2-hit KO it with a low kick. And then, obviously, Ninetales really doesn't like to see a Tyranitar coming. Focus Sash getting broken by sand. It can't really do any meaningful damage into it with the Assault Vest item, and is weak to those rock moves. So there's a lot of weight on Sneasler here as the only thing that naturally really takes on Tyranitar. And like you said, that Terra Fighting on Goldengo could end up being very, very critical in this matchup.
Yeah, going to be up to Harrold to position that, identify when the Terra Fighting is necessary and when he can really just get away with saving that for another Pokemon. I do want to highlight Harrold's resume. Definitely a really accomplished player for a long time. In 2019, the Singapore SC champion. Then in the same year, getting to the Kuala Lumpur regional final. I believe that's the Malaysian regional. World Cup top 8. Part of that team for Singapore in the 2021 season. And then most recently, a 2025 Master Ball League top 16 in Singapore. Just an incredible resume. I actually went ahead and looked up before this regional or this event that in 2020 internationally, he was able to get top 16 in the DC Open, which was a previously basically a previous regional that would happen after Worlds. So overall, just a really accomplished competitor across the years. Definitely going to be up to, going to be a big challenge for Bendik, but I definitely hope he's up to the challenge. It's going to be a really fun match between that Terrifighting Goldango and the Sneasler trying to deal with that Tyranitar sand mode, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Harrold may be the more accomplished of the two players, but I think the matchup maybe favors Bendik slightly, so we could be in line for an upset here. Let's have a look at how these games start off. We are going to see the Dragonite and Ninetales coming out immediately from Harrold into Garchomp and Kilowattrel from Bendik.
Yeah, about as nice of a lead as you could expect from the Ninetales. Really kind of a risk to lead that. If the Tyranitar leads, then you just immediately are the slower of the two and overwrite the snow warning, snow on the field with your Sandstream. But not the case. You're actually pretty well suited here. You have a Blizzard threatening the Garchomp with a 1-hit KO unless it Terras, and even then it's still Terra Ground, so it's going to be weak to that. But as we see, there is a Tyranitar in the back, so could be a pretty safe switch in there, although you would potentially be taking a powerful scale shot from that Dragonite.
Yeah, Kilowattrel's under a lot of threat here. Ninetale's not a very offensively strong Pokemon a lot of the time, even though it's hitting those big kind of 110 base power blizzards. It's not often picking up one-hit KOs, but against this field with the 4x weakness on Garchomp and the very, very squishy Kilowattrel, that is threatening a double KO, and Bendik saying, I don't want any of that. Gonna bring in the Tyranitar, getting rid of the accuracy boost on those blizzards so that now they can miss, getting rid of the Focus Sash and the multi-scale in one go here. And we see Tailwind coming up from Bendik as Ninetales does go for that blizzard, lands on both, and Kilowattrel does go down, as we said, in one hit. And that is a critical hit on Tyranitar for a total of around, 30 damage, which I think shows you there the kind of the low special attack on Ninetales, as well as the incredible bulk of Assaultless Tyranitar in sand, as Tailwind goes up for Harrold, matching Bendik's.
Yeah, seems like a bit of a null turn for Bendik. Null to negative. You lose the Kilowattrel and you're just matching Tailwinds, but you do make some progress in that you've broken the Dragonite's multi-scale, as well as broken the Ninetales' Focus Sash. You did have to lose Kilowattrel to do it, but at least you're on an even playing field in terms of speed, so you're not going to get overwhelmed by the Dragonite and Ninetales now, just in terms of speed. And you've broken their effective Focus Sashes and now are able to threaten potential knockouts and really start to get the ball rolling on this game.
Yeah, we see the Sneasler coming in now for Bendik, and I think another overlooked thing of the snow going away here is that Ninetales loses its defense boost. So now without that Focus Sash, Diaclaw is threatening to KO it from this range. So Ninetales may have to make some kind of defensive maneuver here, maybe a Protect, maybe a Terror or a Switch. But at the same time, if you leave your Dragonite vulnerable here, you've got a Rock Slide and maybe a Diaclaw coming into that. So even though Bendik has lost a Pokemon on turn 1, I think there's still good offensive pressure. And we see Harrold go for the Protect here. We'll have to see where Bendik targets. There's no Terror. And we see a fake out into the Dragonite's Protect here. Ninetales going to be the next Pokemon to move, going to be firing off an Icy Wind to lower the speed on that Sneasler, but it is going to get removed immediately by that White Herb item. And in fact, Sneasler's going to end up going even faster than before thanks to its Unburden ability. So now the speed is very much in Bendik's favor with this Sneasler. Rock Slide comes out, hits the Protect for the Dragonite. Does it connect on the Ninetales? This could be very big without the Snow Up. How much damage is this doing? Ninetales does go down to the Rock Slide thanks to that defense boost going away. And now we're at 3 Pokemon apiece.
Yeah, Ninetales goes down, meaning that if Bendik wants, he can have Sand on the field for the rest of the game if he manages Tyranitar well. But I do want to highlight, the Dragonite is still on the field, and you've actually, with the Icy Wind, eliminated the White Herb. So now bringing in the Incineroar, you do get the full effect of your Intimidate, affecting both the Tyranitar and the Sneasler. Could be very pivotal, especially since the Dragonite does have that multi-scale cleared. It's not so weak since it hasn't gone for a scale shot yet. But yeah, definitely a very pivotal Icy Wind. Even though it didn't look like it didn't have any effect immediately. Really sets up the field for Incineroar to come in and be threatening a lot with the Fake Out, to slow down the Sneasler, potentially force a Protect Out, and leave the Dragonite free to go into the Tyranitar, potentially Fake Out that and just prevent it from moving since the Sneasler isn't that much of a threat. But yeah, definitely a very pivotal turn previously, even though it didn't look so flashy.
Yeah, Ninetales saying, okay, I've done my job. I've gotten rid of the Kilowattrel. I'm just going to let Incineroar do its thing. Now getting rid of that White Herb. Incineroar comes in, does what it does best. That is a Fake Out into Tyranitar. And we see the Scale Shot coming into the Tyranitar from Harrold, reading the Protect on the Sneasler. How many hits are we going to get here? It looks like this might be close if there's 5, 72 down to 47. No, Tyranitar will live another one of those hits, but we don't see the hit come out. Now Dragonite at -1 defense, but Tyranitar at -1 attack. Is this Rock Slide going to be enough? It's not, because it got faked out. I somehow completely forgot that. Tyranitar flinching thanks to that fake out, and that's a very strong turn from Harrold. Being able to read that protect, get the scale shot damage down on Tyranitar, which is the biggest threat on this team. But that Sneasler is still looking a little bit scary. Where there is a Dire Claw, there is a way to pull it back.
Yeah, although the effect of the Icy Wind was to allow for Intimidate in future turns, you did still give it the speed boost with Unburden, and so now even though your Dragonite is at +1 speed due to the scale shot, it's also at -1 defense and potentially susceptible to a Terra Stellar. Dire Claw doesn't look like that's the direction that Bendik is going to be taking this turn, but yeah, really brilliant read previous turn, just locking down that Tyranitar slot as the Sneasler played defensively. We see why that Sneasler definitely a big priority for Bendik as he goes for the Terra Stellar this turn, setting up for a potential KO.
Is this going to be enough to pick up the KO on the Incin with this -1 close combat? Now, how bulky is this Incin trained to be? Not bulky enough. Incin drops to the Terra Stellar close combat, even at -1. Sneasler is now vulnerable, but with Incineroar down, there's no Intimidate left on the field. No option to Parting Shot out and keep dropping the attack stats on Bendik's end. We do see the Dragonite connecting with the Scale Shot, picking off the T-Tar, which we identified was the biggest threat on this team. But the question now is there enough left for Harrold to clean up this game? Sneasler is still going to be the fastest thing on the field, even with Dragonite at +2. It does have the threat of a Stellar Terra Dire Claw into that -2 Dragonite, which might be enough to get the KO after all of this Sand Chip. And there is a Garchomp in the back, but there's no Trustalization for Bendik, so this Garchomp is always at risk of getting hit by a Scale Shot, and we see the Ursaluna coming in now for Harrold, which is very well positioned in front of this intimidated Sneasler.
Yeah, you'll definitely, after the Stellar Terra has been burned on the Incineroar, you can only use, get the Stellar Terrestrialization boost on
Tongue Twister.
one. Yeah, exactly. You can only get it on one of each type that you use, so you still have it active on the Dire Claw, which will potentially knock out the Dragonite, but the Ursaluna should be safe from that. This Dragonite does have Haze, Tailwind, Protect, doesn't have E-Speed or Extreme Speed, which sometimes would be able to knock out that Sneasler at -1 defense after it went for that close combat. Just a trade-off of the versatility of the set. But yeah, I think the important thing is the Sneasler is at -1 attack stat. The Ursaluna will be able to take a close combat, so you really do need an aggressive double up to knock out that Ursaluna, which would open up the Dragonite to take a Scale Shot KO on either of the slot and potentially win the game off that. So really big call here as the Dragonite does go for Protect, playing defensively.
You see the Protect on Dragonite. It doesn't look like Bendik's called this. Gone for the Dire Claw into the Protect, and now Ursaluna is free to fire off and attack itself. But first, Garchomp is going to go for a Dragon Claw. Going to get a bit of damage down on Ursaluna, not enough that it's particularly relevant. Earth Power comes out, and this will KO the Sneasler. And now I think this Garchomp has maybe just got a little bit too much to do. Maybe Harrold could miss 3 or 4 Scale Shots in a row, but even then you've got the threat of Blood Moon and Hyper Voice from this Ursaluna coming out. This game looks like it's pretty wrapped up for Harrold.
Yeah, ultimately gets that read correct. I think looking at the Ursaluna's HP, some Ursaluna are able to live a close combat from a Sneasler at neutral attack, so it would have been pretty close at -1 even with the Dragon Claw double up. But at this point, you can potentially go for Tailwind to mitigate the risk of a missing Scale Shot. Might not be necessary with the damage output of Blood Moon and Earth Power over the course of several turns, but we're going to see a Terrestrialization come out, saved till the really final moment by Harrold. At this point, you'd need to make a pretty aggressive Stomping Tantrum or Earthquake read to get that, and we'll see what Harrold goes for, whether it be that Tailwind or the Scale Shot here.
It is Scale Shot. It is going to connect, and even 4 hits here will be enough to take out this Garchomp from full HP. So that is, in fact, game 1 going the way of Harrold. A very well played game in what I think is maybe not a fantastic matchup. Identifying the threat of Tyranitar, we saw that Harrold was very, very aggressively targeting down that slot the entire game. And Tyranitar got 1 Rock Slide off the entire game, and it was an impactful Rock Slide because it KO'd the Ninetales, but that then set up the Incineroar to come in. So I think Harrold did a very good job of being able to shut down that Tyranitar to stop it from getting the impact that maybe Bendik would have wanted it to have.
Yeah, I think that Ninetales probably got a lot more mileage than realistically it should against a sand team like this, with Goldango, Tyranitar, Sneasler, like you said, just being Pokemon that in sand can pretty much just knock it out immediately once the Focus Sash is gone. The fact that he was able to get 1 knockout on the Kilowatts roll, granted it was because of hitting through the sand, which, a little unlucky to double hit that Blizzard there. But yeah, the additional Icy Wind and then just that Intimidate drop that was able to stack for the rest of the game because of that really set Harrold ahead. I really think that in the future games, Bendik can allow that Ninetales to take up as much space on the field as it did that one, and he definitely has the tools to prevent it from doing so.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the mix-up from Bendik is to go for a much slower approach, because the Kilowatt Roll did allow him to match Tailwind early on, which put the Sneasler in quite a good position, but with the Tailwind matched on the opposing side, his other two Pokemon, Tyranitar and Garchomp, weren't actually really able to get any mileage out of that Tailwind. So I wonder if maybe the better option is to bring Incineroar into this matchup, potentially, or Golden Go. As you said, the Ninetales got a lot more mileage than it maybe should have done, but an Incineroar lead into the Ninetales Dragonite lead, for example, would get an Intimidate down on Dragonite. Ninetales is not threatening it at all. You've got the option now to start parting shotting, trying to pivot to get your weather in, that kind of thing. So I wonder if maybe a slower approach here might be the sensible option for Bendik as the adaptation in Game 2.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, the Kilowattrel and the Dragonite matching Tailwinds doesn't really work that well since Kilowattrel is susceptible to a knockout on the first turn, whereas Dragonite isn't due to the multi-scale. So really you're just trading even speed control for a Pokemon down, which is rarely going to be in your favor unless you have a really strong Pokemon to snowball damage. And although you have the Nasty Plot Goldengo, that sort of takes a couple turns of your Tailwind to really get going. So I could see, like you said, the Incineroar being led. It's a little scary in the face of the Terrafighting Goldengo and the Unburdened Sneasler. That maybe in the early game 1 was something that dispelled that lead. But this time, if you're expecting your opponent to go for the same thing, might be a strong adaptation to lead that Incineroar, possibly paired with the Goldengo to get some Nasty Plot set up. It's obviously very strong against Dragonite and Ninetales as a pair. Can't receive a lot of damage, and then maybe get that Kilowattrel in the late game to set up Tailwind when you have your Goldengo set up and are ready to sweep. But yeah, going to be an interesting game 2 adaptation with Bendik down a game, and ultimately, really fighting to come back and hopefully notch a win for Norway to potentially move on to the group stage.
Down indeed, but not out. We see the same lead here from Harrold, and we see in fact the same lead again from Bendik, deciding not to mix it up here. I wonder if maybe he was thinking Harrold might go for a mix-up himself, or maybe he's thinking, okay, well, I don't think the 4 Pokemon I brought with the issue, I think maybe the game plan was the problem. So we are going to see, again, that Tyranitar Kilowattrel lead into Ninetales. No, sorry, it's a different lead. There's a Tyranitar on lead this time. Sorry, it switched in so early last game that in my brain, it was just one of the lead Pokemon.
Yeah.
But now we have actually a very, very strong lead from Bendik, I think, because if Dragonite does try and match this Tailwind here, it is going to eat a Rock Slide for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, it felt like the Tyranitar switched in so early that it felt like a lead, but it didn't get to move that turn. You had to switch the Garchomp out and lose your Kilowattrel. Now at least you can go for Tailwind and immediately get Rock Slide damage, which is going to do a whole lot of damage, number 1, but also potentially flinch Pokemon. We're going to see the Ninetales switch out, doesn't like that it's lost the Weather War on lead, and the Incineroar comes in, which is nice in that it intimidates the Tyranitar, but you're still getting a hefty Rock Slide off and a competitive Kilowattrel activation, now up to +2 special attack. Going to be a very, very scary Pokemon, especially if this Dragonite is not able to take a knockout with Scale Shot or match Tailwind.
It's a very aggressive play from Harrold bringing in the Incineroar there. I think that says to me this is probably going to be a Scale Shot into the Kilowattrel just to get that off the field as soon as possible. But because the Tailwind's gone up first, there is a chance there's a Rock Slide flinch here, and if that is the case, this is a very big turn for Harrold now with the Rock Slide flinch. Because you've burned your Terastallization, and now this Kilowattrel is at +2 special attack. You haven't got your speed control. This is the danger of playing into Rock Slide with that 30% flinch chance. There is always a chance that it can just swing the game if you can get that Tyranitar to move before the opponent's Pokemon.
Yeah, excellent damage chipping the Incineroar down, but critically that flinch means that you're not able to go for the Scale Shot and potentially knock out the Kilowattrel. Now it's at +2 special attack. You have the option to potentially go for Terra Ghost to ignore a Fake Out and probably knock out the Dragonite or the Incineroar if you read a Protect on that Dragonite. Although, of course, Harrold could go for a knockoff reading that Terra Ghost. We do see a pretty defensive play from Bendik as he switches in the Incineroar. Not going to affect the Incineroar because of a clear Amulet, kind of cheeky there. And then the Dragonite is going to switch out on Harrold's side into the Ursaluna. So if you're expecting a Thunderbolt there, definitely a very solid switch as the Kilowattrel does in fact play defensive, protects no offense this turn.
Ultra going for Protect, scared of maybe a Fake Out, but Incineroar instead goes for Knockoff. Still hitting into the Kilowattrel though, so a smart Protect there. The Ursaluna not able to come in on a Thunderbolt as it was maybe hoping to. This Kilowattrel still in position. And we do in fact see, as we mentioned, the Incineroar mix-up. Instead of replacing the Kilowattrel, it replaced, I believe, the Garchomp. I didn't see the back end fully. I guess we'll find out later in the game. But again, this Kilowattrel is still very well positioned because now there's Fake Out active on the board. No Fake Out for Harrold, no Protect on the Incineroar slot, and no Speed Control. We do see the Thunderbolt come out. into the Incineroar, which goes down. That's a big obstacle removed for Bendik now with his back-end Tyranitar unaffected by any Intimidate shenanigans. No fake out, instead opting for a parting shot into the Ursaluna, reducing its special attack critically. I don't know, though, if that will be enough to save this Kilowattrel from a potential Blood Moon. It will, however, mean that if Tyranitar comes in, we are going to see very, very little damage from an Earth Power. In fact, I kind of want to see the Earth Power come out into that slot just to see how little it does. It is, in fact, Hyper Voice, though. Kilowattrel surviving that with the parting shot drop. Tyranitar taking very, very minimal damage. But with Tyranitar on the field, this now is a potential Ninetales switch in to allow Harrold to regain that weather control.
Yeah, I think the presence of the Ursaluna Blood Moon is pretty felt there. Otherwise, you can bring the Sneasler in on the Tyranitar slot pretty easily and be threatening near one-hit knockouts on every Pokemon in the field. But because the Ursaluna is there and there's an Incineroar in that parting shot slot, Earth Power could definitely come out there and just knock out your Sneasler if you're not too careful. So it goes for the mid-ground bring of the Tyranitar, which is still threatening a whole lot of damage with Low Kick, Rock Slide into the Ninetales, and then of course the Kilowattrel, still the fastest thing on the field, has a lot of damage coming out with the Air Slash. But yeah, once again thinking of just playing it more defensively and letting the Tyranitar do its thing for a turn, not switching it out to gain weather control.
Speaking of defensive play, we do see the Protect from Kilowattrel getting around an Icy Wind, which probably would have been enough to pick it off from that range. Tyranitar getting its speed dropped. Will still be faster than the Ursaluna this turn because of the Tailwind, but next turn is going to be a different story most likely. And now we see with that snow boost to Ninetales' defense, that Rock Slide doing significantly less damage than it did the first time. Hyper Voice coming out from the Ursaluna, maybe trying to call a Terra Flying on Tyranitar, and even without the Sand boost, that is doing very, very pitiful damage. Tyranitar really not upset by the 3 hits it's taken so far, for a total of, 51 damage.
Yeah, absolutely one of the bulkiest special Pokemon in the game, especially when you're taking these weak or resisted hits. Now you have the Kilowattrel, probably threatening a knockout, definitely threatening a knockout into the Ninetales with the Thunderbolt, but potentially very obvious Protect means that Bendik might be a little bit hesitant to go for that immediately, especially when you could just double up the Ursaluna or get some Tailwind and get some guaranteed damage since the Ursaluna can't Protect. But yeah, we see the Ursaluna switching out as Tailwind should be going up from the Kilowattrel. Going to be that Dragonite coming in. Not going to love taking a Rock Slide. And as we said, this Ninetales is not threatening a whole lot of offensive damage into the Tyranitar at all.
The Tailwind coming up from this Kilowattrel again. I think Bendik saying, okay, Kilowattrel's done its job now. It's taken a KO. It's gotten a second Tailwind up, crucially. And he's happy now instead just to go for probably another Rock Slide here. We do see it come out. It is going to miss on the Ninetales. That's a crucial miss there. Ninetales staying alive, but it crits the Dragonite to make up for it. Tyranitar says, oh, sorry about missing that one. Here you go. Here's a little bit of extra damage as a bonus. I also should point out, I realize now that Tyranitar had taken 41 damage, not 51. So in fact, it's even bulkier than I thought. And again, even that Blizzard from Ninetales in the snow, not really taking any chunks out of it. But another commanding position now for Bendik. He's got the Incineroar in the back still. He's got Tailwind up. He's got the option to switch his Tyranitar out and back in for Sand. He's got Sneasler in, threatening both of these Fairy types with Dire Claw. I think a very, very strong position for Bendik now.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to comment just quickly that the Ninetales was able to outspeed the Tyranitar before it went for the Icy Wind in Tailwind, so potentially an indication of how slow and bulky this Tyranitar is, especially with how well it's been taking hits. But speaking on the turn, yeah, we see the Sneasler just take the safe targeting of the Dragonite, go for a Dire Claw, and take a quick knockout there.
Yeah, again, we see the Tyranitar just staying in from Bendik, saying, okay, I don't actually need weather control now. The snow is not threatening him that much, and the lack of special defense is a bit annoying, but not the end of the world. And so opting instead to just keep the Tyranitar on the field. And now we've got an Ursaluna with no Terastallization available. This looks like a pretty free hit for this Sneasler, and I think now you might switch the Tyranitar out, or just swing a Rock Slide, and this game is looking pretty wrapped up. But anything can happen. When there's a Blizzard, there's always a freeze chance.
Yeah, I think you've effectively locked in on what should be a fairly locked up endgame where you just go for Starateller, completely guarantee you're going to knock out this Ursaluna Blood Moon, and then you likely just Rock Slide and knock out the Ninetales, but of course there is the chance, yeah, we see a Vacuum Wave, could have crit there, but really the only danger here is if both of the Pokemon on Bendik's side are frozen by a Blizzard, because if you don't freeze the Sneasler, it knocks you out with Dire Claw next turn, and yeah, the Tyranitar would just knock you out with Rock Slide this turn, so Ursaluna goes down. we're going to see the result of this blizzard and whether we get to continue playing out this game too.
Now Sneasel's got its Unburden activated as well, which means that even if Ninetales had gone for an Icy Wind or something there, we do see a freeze on Sneasler.
Oh my goodness.
We freeze the Tyranitar? We saw the Tyranitar.
Oh.
Does not freeze, does not miss the Rock Slide, and Ninetales goes down. That is going to be game 2 in favor of Bendik, taking this set to a game 3.
Yeah, it would have been pretty funny if the Tyranitar got burned, or not burned, frozen or missed the Rock Slide. Then we see.
I mean, it would have been funny if it got burned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, freezer burn. I didn't see who Bendik had in the back. If it was a Goldango, you probably just win that game anyways. But yeah, ended up being a very different game than game 1, where you are able to gain Tailwind advantage the whole game with the Tyranitar not knocking out, but flinching the Dragonite on the first turn so that there's no match Tailwind, there's no Scale Shot injury Kilowattrel. We see the full value of that Kilowattrel as a result when it doesn't go down on the first turn. Really punishes Harrold for bringing that Incineroar, and really we see a huge benefit on Bendik's side for bringing his Incineroar. So yeah, definitely gonna be excited to see how the players adjust. I feel like the Ninetales Dragonite lead was fairly safe in the first game, but now we're seeing Bendik has really solved it, or at least has put the odds in his favor to have a solid chance to come out of that turn 1 with some good mileage.
Even then, though, we did. There was a very, very critical flinch on turn 1 from Bendik. So, like, if you get hit by enough Rock Slides, you're going to get flinched by one of them. That's just kind of inevitable. It's not exactly like, oh, that's just very, very lucky. It's kind of a statistical certainty at some point that a Rock Slide will flinch if you let your opponent just click Rock Slide a bunch of times. But that's something to bear in mind for Bendik. I think that maybe that lead isn't as safe as the outcome of that game would suggest. So there's still maybe room to switch it up. I still think an Incineroar lead, maybe the Incineroar Tyranitar lead, keep the Kilowattrel in the back end if you really want to bring the Kilowattrel to this game, could be an option, because that Ninetales is still threatening to one-shot it.
Yeah, I mean, playing that game out, if the flinch doesn't happen, I believe the Scale Shot should knock out regardless into the Kilowattrel, whether it's 4 hits or 5. But if that goes down, you do get a free switch, and you've already gotten a whole lot of damage on the Incineroar as well as the Dragonite, and potentially you can sweep with your Goldango and your Garchomp in the back. It's really just going to depend. Yeah, ideally you want that flinch just because it puts you so ahead with the Kilowattrel, but potentially if it doesn't go down, Bendik might have a backup plan for that as well. So we'll see if there's a, if we're just fully banking on that flinch, or if there is that backup plan to potentially sweep with another Pokemon if we see a repeat of those game 2 leads as we go into this game 3 with a huge switch up in leads for Harrold.
Interesting. We see that Harrold switching up the lead to go for Ursaluna and Dragonite, but we see a switch up back to the game 1 plan from Bendik, going for Garchomp and Kilowattrel, and I'm not sure how much I like that, because I think Garchomp just really isn't applying that much pressure here. Without any kind of damage boosting item on the Garchomp, like a Life Orb, for example, you're not really denting this Ursaluna. Ursaluna is now threatening big damage on both of these Pokemon. So this is now suddenly a very tough position, I think, for Bendik.
Yeah, breaking this Ursaluna is going to be a huge challenge. Air Slash into the Assault Vest Ursaluna, not going to do a whole lot of damage. And we saw in previous games, the Dragon Claw does maybe 30-40% to the Ursaluna. So you're going to be able to answer back with the Blood Moon into this Kilowattrel for a 1-hit KO if you want it, or just a whole lot of damage into both Pokemon with the Hyper Voice. So we see a pretty defensive start to the turn with both of these Pseudo Legends going for Protect.
Yeah, I think Harold worried about maybe a Thunderbolt Dragon Claw double up into the Dragonite, but Bendik, having not gone for that, scared himself of the Scale Shot. We see a bit of a nothing turn there. We see 2 protects. We see a lot of attacks going into... We see the Blood Moon going into protect. But Tailwind is now up for Bendik, which, in this immediate board position, given that Garchomp and Kilowattrel are both faster than both of the Pokemon on Harold's side, is probably not immediately relevant. It may come into play later, but at the same time, it could also come into play if Harold is able to get a Tailwind up now, having that extra turn of Tailwind at the end of Bendik's Tailwind. So potentially getting the Tailwind up immediately might come back to bite Bendik a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. The delayed Tailwind is often more effective just because on the last turn of your opponent's Tailwind, yours is still active. But we see the Terra Fairy from the Dragonite on Harold's side. We didn't, likely expecting a Dragon Claw Thunderbolt double up, which would knock out the Dragonite. But we didn't see that from Bendik. We saw the Thunderbolt and the Earthquake combo. So definitely a very savvy coverage for that play. You are guaranteed to get a lot of damage on the Ursaluna, even though you're not going to get a knockout on the Dragonite. Oh no, we see the Scale Shot miss the Kilowattrel.
Oh, I mean, Kilowattrel definitely goes down to that. You mentioned it earlier, but Kilowattrel has got the defensives of like a wet paper house in a hurricane.
Uh-huh.
It's going down to, you saw how much that Hyper Voice did. That is another crucial piece of RNG going in Bendik's favor there. If that Killer Wattrel goes down, then suddenly there's the option for Harrold to just stall out this Tailwind. He has his own speed control. This Ursaluna, as you mentioned, very, very difficult to get through. But now, instead, we don't get the speed boost on Dragonite. It's already burned its Terastallization now, so Bendik is no longer playing that mind game and can just click Earthquake here if he wants to. That is a really tough miss, again, for Harrold, the flinch in Game 2, and now the Scale Shot miss in Game 3.
Yeah, and that just opens things up so immensely for this Garchomp to go off. Dragonite previously was the only Earthquake immune on the team. Now you just have Earthquake for days. We saw from previous damage that's probably going to knock out the Dragonite, and that is what Bendik just goes for the lock into. Probably with the Terra Ground wouldn't have knocked out the Ursaluna. That thing is going to stick around and potentially take a knockout, maybe 2 with Blood Moon, 1 with Blood Moon, and then if you go for Hyper Voice, maybe you can crit the Garchomp, but yeah, no. Garchomp going to persist. Going to continue to be going for Earthquakes or Stomping Tantrums for a long time to come.
Yeah, Killer Wattrel eventually going down, but again, as in Game 2, Killer Wattrel has stolen just a bit more value than it maybe should have. Surviving just an extra turn or 2 in both instances. Ninetales does come in now for Harrold, which is going to set up the snow, but with Tyranitar still in the back, most likely for Bendik, that snow may not be permanent, and this Ursaluna is very, very vulnerable. If it's an Incineroar in the back, again, as it was last time, this is potentially a very free close combat into that slot, because Ursaluna obviously going to go down to that, and if it switches into the Incineroar with the White Herb on Sneasler, Sneasler won't be intimidated and will be able to fire for close combat into that slot anyway. So Sneasler now in a very, very aggressive position. Garchomp a little bit threatened by the Ninetales here, but with the Tailwind up, I don't know how much it really minds that.
Yeah, the Focus Sash is really the only defensive piece that Harrold has left at this point. You can go for Protect, but install a Tailwind turnout, but you might not get a whole lot of mileage there, and you're just letting your Ursaluna go down. We do see, the Sneasler can go for Fake Out or Protect, a little bit defensive on its own, as we see, just going to be Earthquaking for days, as mentioned earlier, no resistances, and the Garchomp's low enough that even if you get knocked out, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, we see a very defensive play here from Bendik, actually. Pretty aggressive position for him, but Garchomp hanging on from that Vacuum Wave. Going to be pretty crucial now. Earthquake should be enough to pick up the Ursaluna. Interesting, though, to see the Protect come out from this Sneasler. I think maybe Bendik thinking that he wanted to get a Protect off Earthquake to break the Focus Sash on Ninetales, so that when the Tyranitar comes in, that is going to be in range of Sneasler without the snow. But I do wonder if maybe just switching in Tyranitar there might have been a little bit better. Like we said, we had the free hit on the Ursaluna slot if he wants it. And there's not really any threat of the Ninetales carrying the Sneasler. But the benefit of this is that, unlike we saw in Game 1, because Sneasler protected, there's no chance at all for this Ninetales to go for an Icy Wind to get rid of that White Herb. And so this Intimidate now just kind of bounces off it.
Yeah, I think that Ursaluna Vacuum Wave not KOing the Garchomp could be somewhat critical. Now you are able to threaten a knockout into the Incineroar, or at least close to it with the Stomping Tantrum. We see the Tyranitar. As is taken in previous games, the Vacuum Wave wouldn't have done a whole lot of damage, and you have the Focus Sash broken on the Ninetales this turn. Now you've already burned your Protect on the Sneasler, playing defensively in the previous turn, and Fake Out from the Incineroar could either knock out your Garchomp or threaten your Sneasler and make it susceptible to a Blizzard. Bendik saying, all right, let's minimize the chance of the Blizzard even connecting, let alone freezing, because that's probably the only way that I'm going to lose this game with the Ninetales at this point, as we see the Stellar Terastallization come out.
Yeah, Stellar Terastallization coming out now. Ninetales has protected last turn, so it doesn't necessarily have the option to protect again. We do have the Fake Out on Incin available, and that is what we see come out here. Sneasler also having just protected, unable to stop that. Blizzard coming out now in the sand, this time unable to get the double connect. Sneasler dodging that attack. We do see a freeze on Tyranitar, though. This Ninetales does like to get these freezes. I do wonder if this is maybe a bit too little, too late. But with the freeze on Tyranitar now, Sneasler has to be careful with picking its targets, because if it swings at this Ninetales and Incineroar gets a Flare Blitz off on it, that might KO from this range. And now suddenly you're very dependent on Tyranitar waking up. We do see a Protect, though, coming out from Ninetales. Has Bendik correctly targeted the slot? He has. He goes for the close combat now, which with the Stellar Terror boost. That is hard to say. The Stellar Terror boost and no Intimidate. Incineroar is going to go down, and now it is just this Ninetales by itself against... there's a Garchomp in the back, which it doesn't really care about, but the Tyranitar and the Sneasler not going to be able the Ninetales is not going to be able to get through them. I think Honestly, Tyranitar could stay frozen for the rest of the game, and if you keep Sand up, the Sand chip will probably get rid of the Ninetales before the Ninetales gets rid of the Tyranitar. But we are just going to see a Dark Claw come out, and that is going to be Game 3 wrapped up for Bendik.
Yeah, Bendik taking this game after losing the first game in pretty convincing fashion. Yeah, even with the freezes in this late game, the Sneasler ultimately was able to dodge the Blizzard and wasn't the one that got frozen. I suppose in this circumstance where you freeze the Sneasler and the Tyranitar, you're still doing like 20% to the Tyrant, like less than 20% every turn, so it'd have to stay frozen for the rest of the battle. But yeah, really, really great endgame there. Was able to lock down the Incineroar slot, the Ursaluna with the Sneasler, and rather, the Sneasler proved to be just really solid with the Unburden Wide Herb combination to clean up the Ninetales in the late game, and having that Tyranitar to provide the assist and let it dodge that Blizzard, just icing on the cake there. So congratulations to Bendik, a really well played 3-game set after losing the first one. When we see Norway win that match against the Singapore team, and one step closer to being 2-0 in their pool and potentially moving on to the group stage.
Yeah, I do like seeing all the adaptations that Bendik made. It's an interesting thing going into Game 3 where he said, okay, I'm just going to go back to my Game 1 lead. Because the lead that countered his Game 1 lead was very, very bad for Harrold in Game 2. And so he went, okay, I don't think you're going to lead that again. I'm just going to lead the same thing I led in Game 1. And we saw a lot of value coming out from just being able to click Earthquake there, threatening the Dragonite, forcing it to Terrasilize. And again, a little bit of good fortune, but that's the thing with the team that Harrold is using into this matchup. There's always volatility on Scale Shot missing, we saw a couple of Blizzard freezes, we saw some Blizzard misses, we saw Rock Slide flinches. Like, there's a lot of volatility in that matchup, so you can't really be too surprised when something like that does happen. It's bound to happen at some point during the set. So even though that one little bit did go in Bendik's favor, like we said, we saw some endgame freezes, but Bendik at that point was just so far ahead that it didn't really make much of a difference.
Yeah, that early game miss in Game 3 was definitely felt for Harrold. I think we both felt the pain of that one at the same time, just immediately recognized to be a really impactful miss, and that the Kilowattrel just gets to survive for a little bit longer, provide a little bit more value, and let the Sneasler, the Garchomp, and the Tyranitar sweep a little bit less impeded in Tailwind. So yeah, incredible effort by Harrold. I think maybe got a little unlucky on the turn ones with the flinch and the Scale Shot. Played an excellent set regardless, and ultimately Bendik was able to walk away as the winner there.
Yeah, so like you said, a bit of an upset win for Norway, you'd consider, given the credentials of the two players. So that's going to be a very, very confidence-boosting win for Bendik as a player and also for Norway as a team. If they can round out this week with a win, then that will put them through to the next round. So now on the rest of Norway's team to try and close that out. But that's going to be it for our first game of today. An exciting one to start off with, a lot of highs and lows, a bit of a roller coaster of a set. So hopefully the rest of the sets are all as entertaining as that one was. But we're going to close out for now on our first match. We will be back very, very shortly with our set number 2, so do not go anywhere.